The herbalist's hut smelled of burning sage and desperation. Amara's trembling hands clutched the dried root, her swollen eye barely open, blood still fresh on her torn wrapper. "Mama and Ketchy, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. Tonight, he will kill me." I saw it in his eyes. The old woman's weathered face remained unreadable as she pressed the gnarled root into Amara's palm. "When he raises his hand again, you will chew this and speak your truth. Not before, not after, only in that moment." "What will it do?" Amara's good eye widened with fear and something else. Hope, perhaps, or madness. "It will give you what you've lost." Mama and Ketchy's voice dropped to a whisper. "But child, once the words leave your mouth, there is no taking them back. The entire village will hear. Everything will change." Thunder rumbled across the night sky. In 6 hours, something would happen in Chitty and Amara's compound that would shatter the silence of their village forever. But first, we must understand how a love story became a nightmare. Hello, guys. Welcome to Africantales by Tummy. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And most important thing, turn your notification bell so you can get informed when I drop another amazing story. Drop your thoughts and reactions in the comments. What would you do if your spouse tried to kill you and you survive? Will you take a revenge or disappear forever? 3 years earlier, Amara had worn red on her wedding day. The color of love, the elders said. The color of blood, she would later think. She woke that morning to roosters crowing and the familiar ache in her ribs. Chitty had already left the farm. He always left early now, as if he couldn't bear to see what he'd done in the daylight. Amara moved carefully, each breath a reminder of last night's discipline, as he called it. At the communal stream, the other women fell silent when she approached. Their eyes flickered to the purple bruise on her collarbone, visible above her wrapper, then quickly away. This was a village dance. See everything, say nothing. Family matters stayed within compound walls. Amara called out a D's, her voice too bright, too loud. "The yams are growing well this season." "Eh?" "Yes, sister." Amara knelt by the water, watching her reflection ripple and distort. Sometimes she barely recognized the woman staring back. Where had the girl who laughed gone? She filled her clay pot as the women discussed Chief Okafor's daughter's upcoming wedding. The price of palm oil, anything but the truth sitting heavy among them like a stone in still water. Back home, Amara swept the compound, prepared a goosey soup, and checked on her small vegetable garden. The only thing that still brought her joy. Her tomatoes were thriving despite the harsh sun. Survivors like her. The day crawled toward evening. Her stomach knotted as shadows lengthened across the compound. This was always the worst time. The waiting. Would he come home drunk? Would he come home at all? And which was worse? She heard his footsteps at dusk. Heavy, uneven, drunk. "Woman!" His voice cut through the humid air. "Where's my food?" "It's ready, my husband." She kept her voice soft, submissive. Sometimes it helped. Not tonight. Chitty stumbled into their small parlor, his eyes bloodshot and wild. "You embarrassed me today. At the market, you greeted Chief Okafor before greeting his son. You made me look like I cannot control my own wife." Amara's heart hammered. She hadn't even seen the chief today. "My husband, I didn't—" The first blow caught her across the face, spinning her into the wall. Her cheek exploded with pain. "You dare talk back?" Another blow, this one to her stomach. Air rushed from her lungs. She crumpled to the floor, arms over her head, the position she knew too well. The blows rained down, each one punctuated by his accusations, his rage, his shame that he wore like a cloak and beat into her flesh. "This is because you love me," he panted between strikes, "to make you a better wife, a obedient wife." Through the pain, through the fear, something stirred in Amara's chest. Not for first time, but stronger now. A tiny flame of rage that refused to die. When he finally exhausted himself and collapsed onto their bed, snoring almost immediately, Amara lay on the floor and tasted blood in her mouth. Above her, a gecko clicked from the rafters. Outside, the village continued its evening routine. Children laughing, women calling families to dinner. life flowing around her suffering as if it didn't exist. She didn't cry. She'd learned tears changed nothing. But tonight was different. Tonight, she would make a choice. When Chitty's snores deepened, Amara pulled herself up and limped outside. The moon was high and full, casting silver light across the village paths. She knew where she needed to go. Mama and Ketchy's compound sat at the edge of the village, where the forest began to reclaim the land. The old herbalist rarely slept, and tonight, her door stood open as if she'd been expecting someone. "Come, child." Mama and Ketchy's voice drifted from the darkness. "I've been waiting for you." Morning came with the sound of pounding, someone making fufu in a neighboring compound. Amara woke on the mat in Mama and Ketchy's hut, her body screaming with fresh bruises. The herbalist had tended her wounds with cool leaves and bitter-smelling paste, but some pains went deeper than medicine could reach. "You should eat." Mama and Ketchy pushed a bowl of pap toward her. "Your sister arrives from Lagos today." Amara's stomach dropped. Obioma? But she wasn't supposed to come until next month. The university closed early. She sent word 3 days ago. The old woman's eyes held knowledge and warning. "She will see, child. She will know." Obioma, her baby sister who'd escaped to the city, who studied law and wore jeans and spoke about women's rights. Amara had hidden the truth in letters, painting a picture of happiness that grew harder to maintain with each lie. She returned home to find Chitty gone again. Good. She cleaned herself up, changed into a fresh wrapper, and tied her headscarf carefully to hide the swelling at her temple. In the cracked mirror, she practiced smiling. The smile didn't reach her eyes. It never did anymore. The marketplace buzzed with its usual chaos by mid-morning. Women haggled over prices of dried fish and fresh peppers. Children darted between stalls, laughing. Amara moved through it like a ghost, collecting yams, palm oil, and stockfish for dinner. "That's a nasty fall you must have had," said Mama Blessing, the yam seller, her voice dripping with false concern. Everyone knew. Everyone always knew. "I'm clumsy," Amara replied, the lie automatic now. My own daughter was very clumsy in her marriage, too, until she fell so hard she never got up. The older woman's eyes hardened. Sometimes, a woman must learn to watch her step better. Amara paid quickly and moved on, shame burning hotter than any bruise. Was this what her life had become? A cautionary tale whispered over yams? "Sister." She turned to see Obioma pushing through the crowd, her natural hair in a high puff, her eyes bright with excitement. Her baby sister looked so free, so untouched by the weight that crushed Amara daily. They embraced, and Amara felt Obioma stiffen. "What's wrong with your ribs?" Obioma pulled back, her gaze sharp, searching. Then she saw it. Despite the makeup, despite the careful arrangement of fabric, she saw. "Amara, what is this on your face?" "I fell." "Don't." Obioma's voice dropped, cold and hard. "Don't you dare say you fell. I'm not one of these village women who pretends not to see. What is Chitty doing to you?" The marketplace seemed to pause, women's conversations faltering. Amara felt eyes turning toward them. "Not here," she whispered desperately. "Please, Obi, not here." They walked in silence to the edge of the village, to the grove where they played as children. Only when they were alone did Obioma explode. How long has he been beating you?" It's complicated. He's under pressure. His father's debts, the land. I don't care if he's under the weight of the whole world." Obioma grabbed her shoulders. "He has no right to put his hands on you. We're leaving. Today. You're coming back to Lagos with me. I can't just leave my marriage." "Why not? What do you owe a man who beats you?" "Everything and nothing. Duty and shame. The family name. The bride price paid. The expectations of community, culture, tradition. Weight stacked so high Amara couldn't see over them anymore. "You don't understand," Amara said weakly. "This is my life. My place." "Your place?" "Sister, look at yourself." Obioma's eyes filled with tears. "You're dying here. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but every day he steals a piece of you. How much of you is left?" Before Mara could answer, they heard shouting from the village center. Running. Commotion. They hurried back to find a crowd gathered near Chief Okafor's compound. Women were crying. Men stood in tight circles, voices raised. What happened? Obioma grabbed a passing boy. It's a Dees, he said breathlessly. Her husband beat her so badly last night that she can't walk. They've sent for the doctor from the town. Amara felt the ground tilt. A Dees, the woman who'd smiled too brightly at the stream that morning. How many of them were dying slowly in plain sight? That night, Chitty came home earlier than usual. He found Obioma sitting in their parlor, her presence filling the small space with challenge. Obioma was surprised. His voice was careful, controlled. In front of others, he was always charming. You're looking well. City life agrees with you. Does beating my sister agree with you? Obioma stood, meeting his eyes without flinching. The air crackled with tension. Amara positioned herself between them, heart pounding. Your sister is clumsy, Chitty said, that dangerous softness creeping into his voice. She falls often. Perhaps she needs to be more careful. Or perhaps you need to keep your hands to yourself. Something snapped behind Chitty's eyes. Amara saw it, that familiar darkness rising. She'd learned to read the signs, the twitch in his jaw, the way his fists clenched. Obioma, please, she whispered. Just go. I'm not leaving you with him. This is my house. Chitty roared suddenly. All pretense dropped. You come here with your Lagos manners, your educated tongue, trying to destroy my marriage? Get out. Not without my sister. He moved fast, grabbing Obioma's arm. But Obioma had taken self-defense classes. She twisted, breaking his grip, and shoved him back. Touch me again, and I'll have you arrested. Unlike the people in this village, I know your actions are crimes, not culture. Chitty's face contorted with rage. He turned to Amara. You brought this disrespect into my home? Amara couldn't speak, couldn't move. Answer me. His hand raised. Stop. The voice came from the doorway. Mama Nkechi stood there, her presence commanding despite her small frame. Behind her, several village women crowded, drawn by the shouting. For the first time, witnesses filled their home, the private shame made public. Chitty's hand lowered slowly. Even he wouldn't strike his wife in front of the herbalist and half the village. This is family business, he said through gritted teeth. No, Mama Nkechi replied quietly. This is village business now. A Dees lies broken in her compound. How many more women must fall before we stop calling it family business? The women murmured agreement. Chitty looked around, seeing his power questioned for the first time. Everyone out, he said coldly. Now. They dispersed slowly, reluctantly. Even Obioma left when Mama Nkechi touched her arm. But the old herbalist paused at the door, catching Amara's eye. Remember, child, she said, you are not alone, and you are not helpless. Even the smallest seed can split stone when it's ready to grow. When they were alone, Chitty didn't beat her. He did something worse. He wept. I'm sorry, he sobbed, pulling her into an embrace that felt like chains. I don't know what comes over me. I love you, Amara. You know I love you. It's just, everything is so hard. The debts, the shame of losing my father's land, the way men look at me in the village. I feel like I'm drowning. You're the only thing I can control. And there it was, the cycle that kept her trapped. The monster became the man. The man made promises. The promises turned to pain. And the pain always came back. I know, she heard herself say, hating each word. I know. But later, as she lay beside his sleeping form, Amara's hand crept to the small pouch hidden beneath her wrapper. Inside was the root Mama Nkechi had given her the night before. When he raises his hand again, the herbalist had said, and he will. Men like him always do. Amara closed her fingers around the dried root and waited for the inevitable. 2 days passed in brittle peace. Chitty apologized repeatedly, brought her flowers from the roadside, even helped her in the garden. All the tender gestures that always followed his violence, like rain after a storm. The village held its breath, watching, waiting. Adiz still couldn't walk. The doctor from town had come and gone, shaking his head. Her husband had disappeared, ashamed or afraid. No one knew which. Obioma extended her stay, sleeping in Mama Nkechi's compound, but appearing at Amara's door each morning like a guardian. The sisters fell into the rhythms of their childhood, preparing meals together, fetching water, talking about everything except the truth sitting between them like a third person. On the third evening, Chitty came home drunk again. Amara smelled the palm wine before she saw him, stumbling through the compound gate, her body tense automatically, muscles remembering every previous beating. Across the room, Obioma's eyes met hers, a silent question. Should she run? Should she hide? But Mama Nkechi's words echoed in her mind. When he raises his hand again. Not if. When. Both of you, Chitty slurred, pointing at the sisters. Sitting there like queens, like you're better than me. Everyone in this village thinks I can't control my own house because of you. He jabbed his finger at Obioma, filling her head with your city nonsense. Brother Chitty, Obioma said carefully, standing, you're drunk. Why don't you sleep it off? We can talk tomorrow. Don't tell me what to do in my own house. His voice rose to a roar. First you disrespect me. Now you give me orders? Amara stood slowly, positioning herself between them again, always protecting, always sacrificing. Obioma, go outside. I'm not leaving you. Please. Something in Amara's voice made Obioma hesitate. Then, reluctantly, she backed toward the door. But she didn't leave. She stood just outside, where she could hear everything. Chitty turned his fury on Amara. You see? Even your own sister doesn't respect you. You're weak. You've always been weak. That's why you need me to make you strong. His hand lashed out, catching her across the face. The familiar pain exploded through her skull, but this time Amara didn't fall. This time, her hand dove into her wrapper and found the root. She bit into it as Chitty raised his fist again. The root tasted of earth and bitterness and something ancient. It dissolved on her tongue like smoke. I said, Chitty began. Then Amara spoke. But it wasn't her voice that came out. It was voices, dozens of them, hundreds of them, all speaking through her mouth at once. Every woman who had ever suffered in silence. Every voice swallowed by fear and shame and tradition. They poured out of her like water from a broken dam. Enough! The word wasn't shouted. It was pronounced, declared, with power that shook the very walls of their home. Chitty stumbled backward, his eyes wide with shock and something else. Fear. Amara felt it then. The true magic of Mama Nkechi's root. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a poison. It was amplification. Every truth she'd swallowed, every scream she'd bitten back, every plea she'd silenced, all of it came flooding back, magnified 1,000-fold. You say you beat me because you love me. Her voice rang out, carrying beyond their compound into the village night. But love doesn't leave bruises. Love doesn't make me flinch when you reach for me. Love doesn't make children hide when they hear your voice. People were emerging from their homes now, drawn by the sound, that impossible, powerful sound of a woman who'd found her voice after years of silence. You say it's discipline. You say it's culture. You say it's your right as my husband. Amara took a step forward, and Chitty took one back. But I say you're a coward, a broken man who breaks others to feel whole. Amara stopped. His voice cracked with panic. I will not stop. I have been silent for 3 years, choking on words while you choke the life from me. No more. Her voice rose, and with it, other voices joined from outside. Women's voices. No more, someone echoed. It was Adiz's mother. No more. Another voice. And another. The women of the village were gathering in the compound, their presence a tide that couldn't be turned back. They stood behind Amara, their faces carved from determination and grief and rage too long suppressed. Chitty looked around wildly, seeking support from the men he'd shared palm wine with, the ones who'd laughed about keeping wives in line. But even they looked uncertain now, faced with this collective rising. You want to know what really happened to your father's land? Amara's voice dropped to something colder than ice. You gambled it away. Not debt collectors. Not bad luck. You. And rather than face that shame, you took it out on me. Beat it into me, as if breaking my bones could rebuild what you destroyed. The truth hung in the air like smoke from a sacrificial fire. Chitty's face crumbled. That's not, I didn't, but his denial was hollow, and everyone heard it. Chief Okafor pushed through the crowd, his face grave. For once, he couldn't look away, couldn't dismiss it as family business. Too many witnesses. Too much truth spoken too loudly. Chidi Okonkwo, the chief's voice carried the weight of judgment. You will leave this compound tonight. The council will meet tomorrow to decide your fate. She's my wife. This is my home. No. Mama Nkechi appeared beside Amara, her hand on the younger woman's shoulder. She was your victim. This was your hunting ground. But that time is finished. As the chief's sons escorted a protesting Chidi away, the herbalist turned to Amara. The other women pressed close, their presence a protective circle. The root? Amara whispered, her voice, her real voice, returning. What was it? Dried ginger and herbs. Mama Nkechi replied with the hint of a smile. The magic wasn't in the root, child. It was always in you. You just needed to believe you deserved to use it. Amara sank to her knees, the adrenaline draining away and leaving her shaking. But strong arms caught her, dozens of them, the women of her village, holding her up as she'd held her pain for so long. Obioma knelt beside her, tears streaming down her face. Sister, oh, my sister, you were so brave. I was so scared, Amara sobbed. I'm still scared. Fear and courage aren't opposites. Mama Nkechi said softly. Courage is what we do despite the fear. And tonight, you did something that will change more than just your life. She was right. As dawn broke the next morning, 3 more women came forward with their own stories. By afternoon, it was 6. By evening, a dozen women sat in Chief Okafor's compound, speaking truths that had rotted in darkness for generations. The village would never be the same. Neither would Amara. But sometimes, everything must break before it can heal. The council meeting lasted 3 days. It began in the traditional way. Men sitting in a circle under the ancient Irako tree, passing around cola nuts and palm wine, speaking in proverbs and parables that said everything and nothing. But the women stood at the edges now, no longer silent shadows. They stood with their arms crossed, their eyes demanding, their presence impossible to ignore. Chitty sat in the center, smaller somehow, stripped of the power violence had given him. His brother spoke on his behalf, invoking tradition, asking for forgiveness, promising he would change. A man has a right to discipline his household, his eldest brother argued. This is our culture. Our fathers' fathers were wrong. The voice came from an unexpected source. Chief Okafor's own son, Ikenna, recently returned from university. Culture is an excuse for cruelty. It's supposed to protect us, not destroy us. The older men muttered disapprovingly, but others, younger men who'd witnessed their mother's suffering, nodded agreement. Mama Nkechi rose to speak, her aged voice carrying across the gathering. I have lived 73 years in this village. I've set bones broken by discipline. I've given herbs to hide bruises before ceremonies. I prepared bodies of women who died from accidents we all knew were murder. How many more generations will we sacrifice our daughters to protect our sons' pride? Amara stood when called to testify. Her legs trembled, but she walked to the center of the circle, a place women rarely entered. She spoke quietly but clearly, recounting not just her own suffering, but what she'd witnessed. Adiz, unable to attend, had sent her mother with photographs the doctor had taken. The evidence was damning. I loved him once, Amara said, looking at Chitty directly. Or I loved who I thought he was. The man who brought me flowers, who called me his sunshine. That man died, or maybe he never existed. In his place was someone who needed to hurt me to feel powerful. That's not love. That's not marriage. That's torture. Chitty wept, whether from genuine remorse or public shame. No one could say. I'm sorry, he kept repeating. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I'll change. Give me another chance. But Amara shook her head. I gave you 1,000 chances. Every time I stayed, every time I made excuses, every time I hid the truth, those were chances. I have none left to give. The council deliberated into the evening. Some elders argued for reconciliation. Send him to a marriage counselor, have a pastor pray over them, give Chitty time to prove he'd changed. But the women's presence shifted something fundamental. Their collective witness demanded more than symbolic gestures. Chief Okafor finally stood. Chitty Okonkwo, you have brought shame to your family and to this village. The evidence of your actions is clear. Therefore, we decree your marriage to Amara is dissolved. You will return her bride price in full. You will attend counseling in town for 1 year. And you will perform community service, building a shelter where women can seek refuge from violent homes. A shelter? One elder protested. But that will tell outsiders we have this problem. We do have this problem, Ikenna replied firmly. Hiding it only makes it worse. The decree was unprecedented. Divorces happened, but rarely at the wife's request, and never with such public acknowledgement of abuse. Chitty's family protested, threatened to appeal to a higher council, but Chief Okafor stood firm. Enough, he said wearily. I have looked away too long. We all have. This ends now. As the gathering dispersed, Amara felt Obayoma's hand slip into hers. You did it, her sister whispered. You're free. But freedom felt strange, like wearing new shoes that didn't quite fit. What did freedom mean for a woman in a village that had defined her entire life by marriage? Where would she live? How would she survive? The questions pressed in like walls closing. That night, the women gathered in Mama Nkechi's compound, an impromptu meeting that felt like a ritual. They sat in a circle, sharing food and stories. Some wept, some raged. All of them felt the weight of unspoken years lifting. I have a proposal, said Adi's mother, a textile merchant. We should form a cooperative. The women who've left violent marriages will need income, need support. We can pool resources, share skills, help each other. And the shelter, added another, we should oversee it, not leave it to the men. Who better to run a safe place for women than women who survived? Ideas flowed like water finding new channels. A network of protection, economic independence, education for girls about their rights, classes teaching men different ways to handle anger, stress, frustration. Amara listened, amazed. Her breaking point had become a breaking open, the village itself transforming before her eyes. But later, walking home to the darkened paths, doubt crept in. She passed her former compound, where Chitty still technically lived until he could move out. The door stood ajar. Against her better judgment, she paused. He sat inside, alone, staring at nothing. When he saw her shadow, he stumbled to his feet. Amara, please, can we talk? Every instinct screamed to run. But she'd spent 3 years running from this conversation. Say what you need to say, she replied from the doorway, not entering. But nothing you say will change what happened. I know. His voice was broken, hollowed out. I want you to understand. My father beat my mother. His father beat his. I thought it was normal. I thought it was how men showed they cared, that they were strong. So you knew it was wrong. I didn't. He stopped, shoulders sagging. Maybe I did. Maybe I just didn't want to be different. Didn't want to be weak like the men who let their wives disrespect them. And when I lost the land, when I couldn't provide like I was supposed to, hurting you was the only way I still felt like a man. Amara felt something unexpected. Pity, not forgiveness. Never forgiveness for what he'd done. But sadness for the boy who'd learned violence as love. The man who confused control with strength. You need help, Chitty. Real help. Not from me. From professionals who can teach you what being a man actually means. Because it's not about power over someone weaker. It's about power over yourself. Will you ever forgive me? The question hung between them. Amara thought about it carefully before answering. Maybe someday, for my own peace. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it definitely doesn't mean giving you another chance to hurt me. The man I married is gone. I'm saying goodbye to who I thought you were." She turned to leave, then paused. "I hope you get better, Chitty. Not for me, for the next woman you meet. So she never has to survive you the way I did." Walking away from that compound felt like shedding skin, painful but necessary. Each step lighter than the last. Tomorrow, the Women's Cooperative would hold its first meeting. Tomorrow, her life would begin again, uncertain and frightening, and hers. But tonight, Amara slept in Mom and Ketchy's hut, surrounded by women who become family. And for the first time in 3 years, she slept without fear. The village was awakening. So was she. The text message arrived on a borrowed phone at 3 a.m. "Sister, come quick. It's happening again. But this time, something is different. Adiz." Amara's blood ran cold. 6 months had passed since the council meeting. 6 months of fragile peace. The Women's Cooperative was thriving. The shelter construction had begun. Change was blooming like flowers after rain. But abuse was a weed with deep roots. She dressed quickly, her hands finding the small pouch at her waist. The ginger root Mom and Ketchy had given her, which she still carried as a reminder. Obioma stirred on her mat. "What's wrong?" "Adiz's husband. He's back." They ran to the pre-dawn darkness, joined by 3 other women who'd seen the message. When they reached Adiz's compound, they found something that stopped them cold. Adiz stood in her doorway, very much alive and unharmed. But her husband, Emeka, sat in the dirt of their compound, weeping like a child. And surrounding them both were a dozen women, neighbors, friends, strangers, forming a human wall. "We heard him shouting," explained one woman, an elder Amara barely knew. "And this time, we didn't pretend we couldn't hear. We came, all of us." He raised his hand to me. Adiz said, her voice steady and strong. But before he could strike, I said, "No," just that one word. And then she gestured to the women around her. They appeared, like guardian spirits. Emeka looked up, his face ravaged by shame. I came back thinking I could just continue, that the council's ruling was for show. But when I saw all these women, when I saw I couldn't hide anymore, he buried his face in his hands. What kind of man have I become? Chief Okafor arrived, roused from sleep, taking in the scene with weary eyes that had seen too much and looked away too often. "Emeka, you were counseling. You made promises." "I know." The man's voice broke. I thought I was better. But the moment I felt that rage rising, I became my father all over again. Except this time, there were witnesses. This time, I couldn't lie to myself that it was her fault, that it was discipline, that it was anything but what it really is, weakness. The sun began to rise, painting the compound in shades of gold and crimson. In that light, everything felt suspended between what was and what could be. What happens now? Obioma asked quietly. Chief Okafor looked to Amara, acknowledging without words that this moment belonged to the women who'd survived, not the men who'd enabled. "That's not for me to decide alone anymore." Adiz stepped forward. "I want him gone. Out of this house, out of my life. I want my children to grow up knowing that violence has consequences, that their mother chose herself over fear." "Where will you go?" her mother asked, worried. "Nowhere. This is my home." He will leave. The power in those words silenced everyone. No negotiation. No pleas for another chance. Just a woman claiming her space, her safety, her life. Emeka nodded slowly, defeated but perhaps, finally, understanding. "I'll go to the rehabilitation center in town. The one the council recommended. For real this time. Not because I have to, but because..." He looked at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. "Because I don't want to be this person anymore." As the village began to wake, word spread to the compounds like lightning through storm clouds. Another woman had stood up. Another abuser had been confronted. And this time, the whole community had shown up to witness, to protect, to say, no more. By midday, something unprecedented happened. 7 more women came forward, not to report past abuse, but to prevent future violence. 7 women with husbands who hadn't yet struck them, but whose anger was escalating, whose words were becoming weapons, whose behavior signaled danger ahead. I don't want to wait until I'm broken, one woman told a hastily assembled gathering at the Irako tree. I see the signs now. I won't be silent until it's too late. The village faced a choice. Either admit that their culture had been protecting abusers for generations, or continue to lie that family violence was normal, private, acceptable. Mama Nkechi stood before them all, her small frame carrying the weight of 73 years of witnessing. When I was young, we had a saying, "The pot that will break was already cracked." We believed some marriages, some women, were just destined for tragedy. But I've learned something. The pot doesn't crack itself. We crack it with our silence, our acceptance, our refusal to intervene. Every time we hear a woman screaming and turn away, we swing the hammer ourselves. Chief Okafor removed his red cap, a gesture of humility rarely seen. I have been chief for 30 years. In that time, 3 women died in this village from accidents. I knew, we all knew, and we called it family business, tradition, culture. But tradition that requires blood is not tradition. It's tyranny. Today, we change. Not because outsiders demand it, but because our own daughters deserve better. The declaration sent shockwaves through the village. Some families celebrated. Others grumbled that the old ways were dying, that respect for husbands was eroding. But even those who complained couldn't deny what they'd seen. Women standing together were a force no man could break alone. Within 2 weeks, the shelter's construction accelerated, funded by donations from neighboring villages who'd heard about the awakening in their community. Women's groups from 3 states sent representatives to learn how they'd organized. A newspaper in Lagos ran a feature story. The village where women said enough. But for Amara, the most profound change came quietly, unexpectedly, on an ordinary evening. She was tending her garden. The tomatoes were thriving, heavy with fruit, when a shadow fell across the soil. She looked up to find Chidi standing at her fence, thinner than she remembered, his eyes hollowed by something that might have been wisdom or might have been brokenness. Her first instinct was fear. Her body remembered before her mind caught up, the clench in her stomach, the tightness in her chest. But then she saw Obioma standing in the doorway, alert, saw Mama Nkechi watching from her window, saw 2 women passing by who slowed their steps, ready to intervene if needed. She wasn't alone anymore, would never be alone again. Amara, Chidi's voice was different, smaller, stripped of the rage that had defined him. "I'm not here to ask anything from you. I needed you to hear something, not for your forgiveness. I don't deserve that, but for your freedom from wondering." She stood slowly, placing her gardening tools aside, but staying safely behind her fence. "Speak then. I've been attending the counseling group. Really attending, not just showing up, and I had to face something I've been running from my whole life." His voice cracked. "My father beat my mother until she couldn't smile anymore, and I swore I'd never be like him. But I didn't know how to be different, so I became exactly what I feared. And I took the woman who loved me most and turned her into my mother, silent, afraid, broken." Tears rolled down his face, but Amara felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, not even anger. Just emptiness where he used to live inside her head. "The counselor asked me what I wanted to tell you, if I could say anything," he continued. "And I realize I want to say thank you." "Thank me?" The words came out sharp as broken glass. "For speaking up. For not letting me kill you. Because that's where it was heading, wasn't it? One day, I would have hit you wrong, too hard, and—" He couldn't finish. "You saved your life. But you also saved me from becoming a murderer, from destroying what little humanity I had left." Amara let the words settle like dust after a storm. "I didn't save you, Chidi. I saved myself. What you do with your life now is your choice. But know this, I will never forget what you did to me. Neither will this village. You can change, you can heal, you can become better. But you'll carry the mark of what you were. And that's how it should be." "I know." He nodded, accepting the judgment. "I'm leaving next week. Starting over somewhere else. Not to run from consequences, but because I need to learn to be a man without the weight of who I was crushing me every day. The women's group here is contacting communities where I'm going. They'll know my history. I won't be able to hide. Good. There's one more thing. He pulled out an envelope, placing it on the fence post. The deed to my father's land. The piece I gambled away. I've been working, saving, and I bought it back. It's yours now. Compensation for the bride price I can't repay. For the years I stole. For the pain I caused. Amara stared at the envelope, understanding what it represented. Land meant wealth, security, independence. It was what every woman needed but few possessed. I don't want anything from you. I know, but take it anyway. Not for me, for the Women's Center. Build something good on the ground where so much bad was born. That's the only redemption I can offer. He turned and walked away, his shoulders bent under invisible weight. Amara watched him go, feeling the final thread connecting him snap, like old rope. He was nobody to her now. Not husband, not enemy, just a man who'd once hurt her and was learning, too late, what he destroyed. She picked up the envelope. Inside was indeed the land deed, signed over to the Women's Cooperative. 20 plots of good farming land. Enough to plant a future. Will you accept it? Obioma had approached silently. Yes, but not from him, from a universe correcting an injustice. Blood money turned into seed money. Pain transformed into possibility. That night, the Women's Cooperative held an emergency meeting. When Amara presented the land deed, the room erupted in excited chatter. 20 plots. They could expand the shelter, build a vocational training center, create a farm that would fund their programs for years. But Mama Nkechi raised her hand for silence. Before we celebrate, we must decide something important. This land comes from Chitty's suffering, but also from Amara's. How do we accept gifts born from trauma without letting trauma define us? The question hung heavy. Then Adiz spoke. We plan tomorrow on yesterday's pain. We use what was meant to keep us down as fertilizer for our rising. That's not accepting abuse. That's refusing to let abuse have the final word. The women voted unanimously. The land would become the Daughters of Tomorrow Farm, a working agricultural collective that would employ survivors, teach sustainable farming, and generate income for the center. On part of it, they would build a school where girls could learn not just reading and writing, but their rights, their worth, their power. Construction began within a month. The entire village participated, men wielding shovels alongside women, children carrying water, elders offering advice. The project became larger than revenge or justice. It became proof that communities could heal when they chose courage over comfort. The governor's wife arrived during the foundation laying, bringing with her television cameras and government officials. What you're building here, she told the assembled crowd, is more than a farm or a school. You're building a template for the entire nation. Amara found herself on camera, never having imagined her face would appear on television screens across Nigeria. We're not heroes, she said simply. We're just women who got tired of dying in silence. And when one woman speaks, she gives permission to thousands. That's not magic, that's sisterhood. The interview went viral. Within days, women from across the country were reaching out, asking how to start cooperatives, build shelters, organize resistance to violence. Amara's phone, the first she'd ever owned, a gift from Obioma, buzzed constantly with messages of support, questions, and stories that broke her heart and fueled her determination. 3 months later, the Women's Center officially opened, not just a shelter, but a compound with meeting rooms, a small library of donated books, a medical clinic staffed by rotating doctors from town, and vocational workshop where women learned tailoring, soap making, and computer skills. The opening ceremony drew crowds from 5 neighboring villages. The governor's wife cut the ribbon, but it was the women themselves who took center stage, each survivor sharing a brief testimony that left not a dry eye in the compound. But the most powerful moment came unexpectedly. A young woman stepped forward, perhaps 19, her belly swollen with pregnancy. My name is Chinyu, she said, her voice trembling but determined. And I came here because my boyfriend hit me for the first time last week. Just once. He apologized. He cried. He promised never again. The crowd murmured. One strike didn't seem like abuse. Not yet. But Chinyu continued. My mother said one hit is nothing, that all men do it, that I should forgive him because he's the father of my baby. But I came here because... She looked at Amara. Because I heard that it never stops at one. That just once becomes every week, then every day. That, I'm sorry, loses meaning when the bruises don't have time to fade. I came here because I refuse to teach my daughter that love comes with fists. Amara felt her throat tighten. This was a real victory. Not saving women already broken, but preventing the breaking altogether, teaching young women to recognize danger before it became death. She embraced Chinyu as the crowd erupted in supportive chants. You're not overreacting, Amara whispered. You're being wise and brave. The center provided Chinyu with temporary housing, legal counsel to establish her rights to child support, and vocational training, so she could support herself and her baby. Her boyfriend, confronted by community leaders and facing real consequences for the first time, and her counseling. Whether he would change remained to be seen, but Chinyu's baby would grow up watching her mother choose safety over shame. As months turned into seasons, the Women's Center became the beating heart of the village. But with success came new challenges. Some men, feeling their traditional power eroding, began organizing resistance. They called meetings, citing scripture and tradition, arguing that women were destroying the fabric of society. If women don't respect their husbands, who will? Asked one elder at a heated community gathering. Next, children won't respect parents. Society will collapse into chaos. Ikenna stood to respond, his education and chief son status giving him a platform others lacked. Respect and fear are not the same thing. My father is respected because he leads with wisdom, not because he rules with violence. If the only way you can keep your wife's respect is through beating her, then you never had her respect, only her fear. And fear is not love. Fear is not family. Fear is tyranny. The debate raged for hours. But slowly, the tide had shifted. Younger men sided with progress. Women refused to be silenced. And even some older men, witnessing the joy in homes where partnerships replaced domination, began to question what they'd always accepted as normal. Chief Okafor, in a move that shocked traditionalists, announced that he would undergo training on domestic violence awareness, publicly admitting he'd failed in his duty to protect women in his jurisdiction. His humility gave other men permission to admit their own failures, to learn, to change. But not everyone could change. 3 families left the village rather than adapt. One man, stripped of his power to terrorize his wife, became so enraged that he attempted to burn down the Women's Center in the middle of the night. He was caught by the night patrol, women taking turns guarding their sanctuary, and arrested. The village watched as he was led away, handcuffed, facing real legal consequences for violence against women's property, if not yet consistently for violence against women themselves. The incident, however traumatic, proved something crucial. The women would not be intimidated back into silence. They had tasted freedom, and there was no going back. 6 months after the center's opening, Amara received the invitation to Abuja. The National Women's Conference wanted her to keynote, to share not just her story, but the model they'd built. A village that had transformed from enabler to protector, from silent witness to active defender. The night before she left, Mama and Kechi held a blessing ceremony in the compound. Women gathered in a circle, their voices rising in an old song, one usually sung at weddings, but repurposed now for a different kind of union. Women binding themselves to each other in solidarity and strength. You're going to speak to powerful people, Mama and Kechi said, placing her weathered hands on Amara's head. But remember, you're not going as a beggar asking for help. You're going as a teacher showing the way. What we've done here, we did with almost no resources, no government support, no outside funding. Imagine what women can do when the world actually invests in us. Amara left at dawn, Obioma traveling with her. The bus journey to Abuja took 8 hours through landscape that shifted from lush village green to congested city gray. With each mile, Amara felt her anxiety growing. What if she forgot her words? What if the sophisticated city women dismissed her as a simple village survivor? But Obioma squeezed her hand. They need you more than you need them. They have theories and policies. You have proof. The conference center was overwhelming. Marble floors, air conditioning, women in expensive suits and jewelry. Amara felt like a gecko in a palace, small and out of place. But then she noticed something. Behind the makeup and professional polish, many of these women carried the same shadows she recognized in her own eyes. Survivors hiding in plain sight, their scars invisible but no less real. During the networking session, a lawyer from Lagos approached her. I read about your village in the newspaper. Tell me, how did you convince the men to support you? In my community, they laugh at domestic violence laws. They say it's Western corruption of our values. We didn't convince them with arguments, Amar replied. We convinced them with consequences. For years, men faced no price for violence. When we made it costly, socially, economically, legally, some changed because they wanted to, others because they had to, but either way, the violence decreased. A government minister overheard and joined their conversation. But how do we scale this? Nigeria has thousands of villages. We can't build a women's center in each one. You don't have to build centers, Amara said. You have to build awareness. Change laws so women have legal recourse. Fund women's cooperatives so we have economic independence. Train police to take domestic violence seriously. Create shelter networks. But mostly, stop treating it as a private family issue and call it what it is, a crime. The minister pulled out her phone and began taking notes. When Amara took the stage the next day, her hand shook so badly she nearly dropped the microphone. 2,000 women filled the auditorium, activists, politicians, survivors, students. The lights were blinding. Her mouth went dry. Then, in the front row, she saw them, 5 women from her village who'd pooled their money to make the trip. They'd come to witness her moment, to remind her she wasn't alone. Mom and Kechi couldn't make the journey, but she'd sent a message written on paper. Speak your truth. It's the only credential you need. Amara took a breath and began. My name is Amara Nwosu. 10 months ago, my husband beat me for the last time. Not because he stopped wanting to, but because I stopped allowing it. And that decision, that single moment of saying enough, changed not just my life, but my entire village. She told them everything. The years of abuse. The village's complicity through silence. The night she found her voice with nothing but ground ginger and courage. The women who stood with her. The men who eventually stood with them. The shelter, the cooperative, the transformation. But I'm not here to tell you a fairy tale with a perfect ending, she said, her voice gaining strength. I'm here to tell you that change is possible, messy, painful, and absolutely necessary. That one woman speaking truth can shatter generations of silence. That culture isn't static. It's what we make it. And if our culture requires women to suffer, then it's not culture we need to preserve. It's culture we need to transform. The standing ovation lasted so long that security eventually had to ask people to sit so others could present. But the real impact came afterward. In the hallway conversations, the business cards exchange, the women who approached Amar with tears streaming down their faces, whispering, "Thank you for saying what I couldn't." 3 organizations committed funding on the spot. The minister promised to fast-track a domestic violence bill. A film production company wanted to document their story. And most importantly, women from 12 different states asked Amara to come train them on building their own versions of Neoma House. That night, in the hotel room she shared with Obioma, Amara couldn't sleep. Everything was happening so fast. A year ago, she'd been a woman who flinched at shadows. Now she was influencing national policy. It's overwhelming, she admitted to her sister. It's justice, Obioma corrected. For too long, the wrong people had the platforms. Abusers got to define culture. Men got to decide what women should tolerate. Now, survivors are speaking, and everyone has to listen. They returned the village as heroes. A crowd waited at the bus stop. Children waving palm fronds, women ululating in celebration. Chief Okafor himself was there, bowing slightly in respect, acknowledging that this village woman had done something he with all his traditional authority, had never accomplished. "You've made us proud," he said simply, "and you've made us better." But the celebration was interrupted by a commotion at the village entrance. A car had arrived, expensive, with tinted windows. Everyone tensed. The governor? Police? Some new threat? The door opened and Chitty stepped out. The crowd fell silent. Amara felt her body go rigid, every muscle remembering. Obioma moved protectively in front of her. Women formed a wall. But Chitty raised his hands, palms out, showing he meant no harm. He looked different, thinner, older, wearing shame like a visible cloak. "I didn't come to disturb anyone," he said quickly. "I came because I saw you on television, in Abuja, and I needed you to know something." "You need to leave," Obioma said coldly. "Please, just 1 minute. Then I'll go. I'll never bother anyone again." Chief Okafor nodded for him to speak, but the women didn't lower their guard. Chitty's voice cracked as he began. "I've been in therapy. Real therapy, not just anger management classes to look good. And my therapist made me do something difficult. Made me truly see what I did. Made me watch videos of domestic violence and see myself in those men. Made me read stories from survivors and recognize your words and their pain." He pulled out a folder, hand shaking. "I also wrote letters. To every woman in my family, my mother, my sisters, my cousins, telling them what I did. Telling them that if any man ever treats them this way, they should run. That I'm the cautionary tale, not the rule they should follow." Amara studied him, this man who'd once filled her world with terror. He looked broken, genuinely remorseful. But remorse didn't erase history. "You want forgiveness," she stated flatly. "No. I want you to know I understand now that forgiveness isn't mine to receive. It's yours to give or withhold. And either way, I live with what I did. I just needed you to know that I'm not making excuses anymore. I was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong. And if telling my story prevents even one man from becoming like I was, then maybe some good can come from all this evil." He turned to the crowd. "To everyone here, I'm the worst example of what happens when boys are taught that violence is strength, when men believe they own their wives, when community stays silent. Learn from my failure. Be better than I was." Then he got back in the car and left, dust rising behind the wheels like smoke from burned bridges. The crowd stood in stunned silence. Finally, Mama Nkechi spoke. "That changes nothing about what he did, but it changes something about what happens next. If even one abuser can truly face their actions, perhaps others can too." Amara didn't feel forgiveness. Maybe she never would. But she felt something shift, a lessening of the hold his memory had on her. He was just a man now, broken by his own choices, no longer the monster that haunted her dreams. Amara stood at the entrance of Neoma Women's Center, now a sprawling complex with dormitories, classrooms, a thriving farm, and a medical clinic that served the entire region. What had started as one village's awakening had become a national movement. At 33, she carried herself differently than the broken woman who'd chewed ginger root and found her voice. She'd spoken at conferences in 5 countries, trained facilitators in 40 villages, helped draft legislation that made Nigeria's domestic violence laws some of the strongest in West Africa. But today was special. Today, Chinyu, the pregnant teenager who'd sought help after one hit, was graduating from the center's vocational program. She'd learned tailoring, started her own business, and raised her daughter to be fierce and free. Her ex-boyfriend had completed counseling and maintained respectful co-parenting from a distance, never again raising his hand. As Amara watched Chinyu receive her certificate, surrounded by her 3-year-old daughter and proud mother, she saw the future they'd been building. A generation of women who wouldn't tolerate what their mothers had endured. A generation of men learning that strength meant protecting, not harming. Mama Nkechi sat in the place of honor, now 78 but still sharp-eyed. Obioma stood beside Amara, no longer just her sister, but her partner in running the center's legal aid program. And Ikenna, patient, kind Ikenna, waited nearby, the man who taught Amara that love could be gentle, that partnership could be equal. They'd married a year ago, after she'd healed enough to trust again. Their wedding had been the village's celebration. Proof that endings could become beginnings, that broken women could become whole again, that the cycle could break. As the ceremony concluded and women ululated in celebration, a young girl approached Amara shyly, perhaps 10 years old, with bright eyes and braided hair. "Mama Amara," she said. The title had stuck, spreading beyond the village. "I want to be like you when I grow up, strong and brave." Amara knelt to meet her eyes. "You already are strong and brave. You just need to remember it. And whenever someone tries to make you forget, speak up. Your voice is your power. Never let anyone silence it." The girl beamed and ran back to her mother, one of the women who'd left an abusive marriage 3 years ago and now ran a successful restaurant in town. That evening, as the sun set over the daughters of Tomorrow Farm, fields of cassava and vegetables tended by women who'd transformed pain into productivity, Amara walked the paths with Mom and Ketchy. "You've done well, child," the old woman said softly. "We've done well," Amara corrected. "None of this exists without you. Without that night you gave me permission to save myself." "The root?" Mama and Ketchy chuckled. "You know, I gave that same magic root to 12 women before you. Most threw it away. Some kept it, but never used it. You were the only one brave enough to chew it and speak. What made me different? You'd reached your breaking point. And sometimes we have to break completely before we can rebuild ourselves stronger." The old woman stopped walking, turning to face Amara. "I have something to tell you. I'm dying." The words hit like a physical blow. "What?" "No, the doctors have given me 6 months, perhaps a year." Mom and Ketchy held up her hand to stop the protest. "I'm not afraid. I've lived a full life. I've seen change I never dreamed possible. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll keep telling the story. Not just yours, ours. Every woman who's ever been silenced, who found her voice, who chose survival over submission. Promise me you'll train the next generation of healers, activists, fighters. Promise me this movement outlives us both." Tears streamed down Amara's face. "I promise." "Good." Mama and Ketchy smiled, peaceful. "Then my work here is finished. The rest belongs to you and the daughters coming after." 6 months later, Mama and Ketchy died peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by the women she'd saved and the movement she'd sparked with nothing but ground ginger and unwavering belief in women's power. Her funeral drew thousands, women from across Nigeria and beyond, all coming to honor the herbalist who taught them that magic wasn't in roots or rituals, but in the courage to speak truth to power. Amara delivered the eulogy, her voice strong and clear. "Mom and Ketchy once told me that every generation needs women who break chains so the next generation doesn't have to wear them. She broke hers alone in silence and shame. I broke mine with her help and the support of women who refuse to look away. And now, thousands of women are breaking theirs together, creating a future where our daughters won't need to break anything because they'll never be chained in the first place." The crowd responded with a thunderous affirmation that echoed across the village and beyond. Amara stood before the Nigerian Senate, testifying on proposed amendments to strengthen domestic violence protections. At 43, silver threaded through her hair, she'd become one of the country's leading advocates for women's rights. But she still carried a small pouch at her waist, dried ginger root, her reminder the night everything changed. The senators listened as she spoke about Neoma houses in 80 villages, about the thousands of women saved, about communities transformed. She spoke about Mama and Ketchy's legacy, about Chinya's daughter growing up free, about men like Ikenna who proved that masculinity and gentleness could coexist. But the work isn't finished, she concluded. Every day, women still die from domestic violence. Every day, girls are taught to accept pain as love. Every day, communities choose silence over justice. We have the laws. Now we need the will to enforce them. We have the centers. Now we need the funding to expand them. We have the survivors ready to lead. Now we need the power structures to follow. The chamber erupted in applause. 3 new bills passed that day, inspired by one woman's courage to chew a piece of ginger root and speak her truth. That night, Amara returned to her village. She'd never moved the city, choosing instead to remain rooted in the place where her transformation began. Her home sat on land she'd purchased herself, with a garden that grew more beautiful each season. Ikenna waited on a veranda, their 6-year-old son playing in the yard, a child growing up watching his father cook, clean, and care without shame, learning that real strength was kindness. "How did it go?" Ikenna asked. "We won. All 3 bills passed." He embraced her, and she melted into his arms. Still sometimes amazed that touch could be tender, that love could be safe, that marriage could be partnership. Their son ran up, muddy and grinning. "Mama, I planted tomatoes like you taught me." She laughed, lifting him. "Did you remember to water them?" "Yes. Papa said survivors need water to grow. Are tomato survivors." Amara and Ikenna exchanged glances. Such wisdom from a child raised in a home without violence, without fear. "Yes, baby," Amara said softly. "Everything that grows despite hard soil and harsh sun is a survivor. Just like your mama, just like your grandmother Nkechi, just like all the strong women you'll meet in your life." As the sun set over the village, transformed now, with a women's center as its beating heart, with men and women working side by side, with children growing up knowing violence was never acceptable, Amara felt it. Peace, not the absence of pain. She still carried scars, still sometimes woke from nightmares of that life before, but peace in knowing she transformed that pain into purpose, that darkness into light, that one woman's breaking point into a movement that was reshaping a nation. She touched the pouch at her waist one last time, then removed it. She didn't need it anymore. The magic had never been in the root. It had always been in her, in every woman who'd ever been silenced and found her voice, who'd ever been broken and chose to heal, who'd ever been chained and decided to break free. That night, she placed the pouch in a special box in the Women's Center Museum, a shrine to Mama Nkechi and all the women who'd fought before. Beside it, she placed a note. "To every woman who will visit this place, the power to change your life has always been inside you. You don't need magic. You don't need permission. You just need courage. And when you speak your truth, no matter how much your voice shakes, the whole world will have no choice but to listen. Speak, survive, soar,